At 100 FM, the Pike, Worcester's classic hits, Bruce Palmer, and there's a great show coming into Indian Ranch, one of America's favorite rock and roll bands that I've got the honor from KC and the Sunshine Band of KC joining me on the line. Hello, KC.
How you doing, man?
Oh, man, it's great to have you with me. I'll tell you what, you and I have something in common because for 45 years, you've been making great rock and roll, and for 35 to 40 of those years, I've been playing it. Finally, we get a chance to get together.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, man. You know what? It does go back that far. It's a scary number to some. But it all started, now you're from Florida, as I recall, and it all started in Florida back, around 72, 73, am I right?
Yes. I went in the studio and recorded this song, and I called it Casey the Sunshine Junkanoo Band because I didn't want to just call it my name.
Yeah.
So I came up with this name and called it Casey the Sunshine Band. And the first record I did made some noise, and so they wanted another record. And then I made another record, and then eventually we had to go on tour. And I asked some of the people that were playing on the record to join me on tour, and that's kind of how it went about.
Okay, so in other words, you had some session performers who came on the road with you, and at one point, your group, as the Sunshine Band, you must have, at one point, had a good 9, 10 folks all together on stage.
It's 15 of us on stage now. I think back then there was maybe 13.
Wow, it must have gotten crowded up there, huh, Casey?
It was very crowded.
You know what was really special about this time in rock and roll is that Casey was really pioneering. He was bringing forth a style that wasn't quite, it was funk, but it was some rhythm in there, and a whole new term started to be coined. A term that we would call disco, but you know something? It would be the start of a musical revolution, and there was KC right in the middle of it. Did you know that you were really making history at the time, or were you just having a good time, Casey?
I knew I was changing things. I had no idea that I was really, doing something that would become historical at the time.
Yeah.
I knew that I was changing things, and I wanted to change things because when I started making the music, I felt music had gotten very dark, and I wanted to change that and put energy back and life back in the music. And that's what I set out to do. And
certainly accomplished it. Now, of course, as you continue forward over time, things are always changing. By the time you'd been pretty big professionally for the better part of a decade, things were changing again in the early 80s, and for a while, you actually disbanded the Sunshine Band, right?
Yes. I retired in 1983 for about 10 years and then decided to get back out and do something that I had missed and that I love to do, and I've been out ever since.
I seem to recall, I certainly don't want to travel down that road, but just briefly the fact that you had a very serious health scare in the early 80s, and I'm sure it made you stop and think about a lot of things, but you came back super strong, and now today, folks are still just absolutely overwhelmed to come in and enjoy KC Live, and you and the Sunshine Band are coming here to Indian Ranch July 8th. I can't remember you having been at the ranch anytime recently. When's the last time you were here?
I think it's been a while. I don't... I go to so many places all the time. It's hard for me to remember. I see the backs of places. I go in through back doors. I see kitchens and hallways and dressing rooms and a stage and people. So it's hard for me to, recall sometimes exactly where I am until I look at the sheet and, we've been here before. I get there and realize, I've been here before.
How much of your life, though, have you spent on the road, Casey? Must be a pretty good chunk of it.
Well, I do about 70 shows a year right now. So, I didn't tour a lot back in the 70s, but I've toured more the last 20 or so years than I have in my whole career. So,
tell me something. Maybe this isn't a number off the top of your head, but I'm just curious. Do you have any idea how many records you sold in your lifetime?
No, it's probably all in all with everything. It's probably close to 100 million.
Yeah, not hard to believe. Not at all. There are some groups that in our lifetime will come and go, but then there are select groups in rock and roll history that you barely finish saying the group's name and images flash into folks' minds of everything they've ever done. And I really think that you and the Sunshine Band, KC, fall into that category.
It's been very interesting because I started out making this pop R&B music, and then a movie came out called Saturday Night Fever, and they started calling the music disco music.
Right.
So it's been very interesting. All of a sudden you're creating a certain music, and then somebody decides, well, let's call it something different than it really was intended to be. So, and then there was a whole backlash of the word disco that a lot of us have gotten, drawn into. But, it was R&B. It was R&B pop that I was creating, and that's pretty much what it is.
Right. As a matter of fact, one of your songs got used in the soundtrack from the film, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Boogie Shoes.
Boogie Shoes, that's the one. Okay, and it's funny. It's not hard at times to forget certain tunes from the KC library, only because there are so many. You start thinking of them, and then you come up with another one. Man, I forgot about that one. It's just such a great list, and I'm going to bet you go to those archives and you're playing that stuff we all know and love, and that's what the show at Indian Ranch is going to include a fair amount of, correct?
It's all of our hits, and then we do. I have bits and pieces of other songs from the album in the show. I try to keep the show as familiar to everyone as possible.
And anybody who is even marginally familiar with the live shows that Casey and the Sunshine Band do, there is one word that would be identified quickly with them, and that would be energy. I mean, you guys put on such a show filled with energy that I'll bet you're getting directly from the audience, which is feeding it right back to you.
Oh, yeah, the audience, whether they know it or not, they always kind of control the flow of the show and the energy of the show. So luckily we have great audiences. They come to have a good time. Mm-hmm. And it's just great to be up there and have some fun. That's when I'm really happy and, watch other people enjoying themselves.
All right, well, look, if you want to look just right to come to the Casey and the Sunshine Band show, again, it's coming to Indian Ranch on July 8th. Tickets are still available. If you want to fit right in, you might want to punch a couple of sequins into your collar or maybe get down your boogie shoes and have a ball, but I guarantee you it is going to be such a great day to rock and roll on Sunday, July the 8th. KC, we are so anxious to see you here in town, and we promise you're going to have a ball just like we will.
Well, thank you. I look forward to being there. We are going to have a great time.